You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. I'm a hoarder who needed an outlet to talk about this unusual and isolating mental illness. And because my hoarding is secret, I started this podcast to talk about it. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor, I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. Hey, how are you? I am well, thank you very much. I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping, and then I am going to talk about finding community, and I'm going to talk about that in terms of communities focused around hoarding, but also wider community, building friendships, reducing isolation, getting community in that kind of way. But first,
let's start with some housekeeping.
So, the briefest of bits of housekeeping today, we have Dehoarding Accountability Zoom sessions coming up. If you would like to join me and others to spend an hour and a half doing some dehoarding while on Zoom with other people who hoard, chatting with me, with other people there. Most people have their cameras off. There's no pressure to reveal who you are. If you would like to come along, the next dates in the calendar are Sunday the 7th of December and Friday the 12th of December. And there are also 2 dates in for January if you want to start 2026 off with some good intentions. And if you would like to come along to one of those, it would be marvellous to see you. Go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/ticket and then click on Get Your Ticket and pick whichever date you want to book on. A lot of people who hoard are very isolated. Whether it is hoarding that makes people more isolated or a tendency towards being isolated that contributes to hoarding is not always clear, but it is definitely true that there is a lot of shame, there is a lot of feeling that nobody could ever understand or that nobody would ever respect me, that can lead us to be isolated. Other people do have friends, but who don't know about their hoarding. I was in this position for a long time. I'm still in this position with most of my friends. However, it is not exclusively the case anymore. In those circumstances, there can be a sense that these people like me, but they wouldn't if they knew. Isolation and loneliness are miserable. They don't help us to get motivated or stay accountable or just feel worthy and loved enough to want to improve our surroundings. We all have a fundamental human need for connection. If you feel cut off from other people, whether you feel that that's related to your hoarding or not, it's incredibly hard. Whether you are ready to talk with others about hoarding specifically, or whether you just want to reconnect with other people in a more general, lighter sense, there are things we can all do to build relationships, to maintain relationships, and to build a community. Because we can be very individualistic in this world. We can be very focused on ourselves and our own lives. It's quite a difficult world to live in at times. And when you're focused on survival, or when you're focused on deep grief that you're feeling, or when you're overwhelmed in your home and you're busy at work and you feel you don't have any capacity, taking time to build and nurture community can feel hard. But ultimately, community can be what saves us, what gets us through. I think as societies, we do better when there is a sense of care within communities. And We all deserve a community of our own, and that can be a number of things. That can be a group of friends, it can be a family, it can be a faith community, it can be a community based on part of your identity, like a queer community or a feminist community, or a community based on volunteering, or a community based on something you love or something you want to learn, or where you live. There can be communities of all kinds, and those kind of interpersonal connections. I can talk about how good that is for our mental health. I can talk about those things, but ultimately those connections can be what gives us a sense that we are worth saving, and what gives us the strength to power through when it's hard. And so while there are many statistics about loneliness and isolation and how bad that is for our mental health, the core of it for me is survival. The core of it for me is that love that we can feel within a community, and that care that we can feel within a community can make such a difference to whether we want to get out of bed in the morning, to whether we feel like we deserve a nice home, to whether we feel like there's somebody cheering us on. So let's talk, first of all, about finding our people in the sense of people who know about your hoarding or who also hoard. There can be an immense relief that comes from speaking with people who really get it. There's something really powerful about being able to say, I'm having real trouble getting rid of any clothes, or things are very difficult in my home, and having someone you don't have to explain that to, someone who knows the context and who may also be having trouble getting rid of clothes, or know or love someone who does. In communities that are specific to hoarding, there can be a sense that we don't have to translate our experience for people who don't get it. We don't have to contextualize or explain what we're going through, and we hopefully have less risk of being judged in those communities as well when we talk about this really, really difficult thing, because people are there because they get it. And if you hoard and it's a big, big secret in your life, there is also something about the authenticity that comes from being able to talk about this thing with someone. As I talked about in episode 200, which was a letter to episode 1 me, some of the people I've met through this podcast have become very close people. And that's mostly because they are wonderful. But there is definitely something about the authenticity and honesty and openness that comes from them already knowing my big secret and kind of liking me anyway. In everyday life, hoarding is very misunderstood as a rule. It's very stigmatized. It's can be very judged. It can be put down to laziness. If you can become part of a community that understands hoarding, there's a shared understanding already. You don't have to justify your very existence to these people. There can also be a shared language. You don't have to explain everything you're saying. People nod. People say, oh, I do that as well. Or people can say, oh, I get stuck on that as well. And you can put your heads together and try and work out what's going on. There are different types of hoarding-specific communities that may be an option for you. One is peer support groups. There are sometimes facilitated peer support groups through mental health centres, through mental health charities, all kinds of things like that. There are occasional, but not enough, peer support groups for children or loved ones of people who hoard. That's definitely an area where I know a lot of people would benefit, but there's very little provision at this point. Some of these meetings are in person, some are online. Now, in person may feel like an opportunity to really, really connect with people. You may feel closer to people because you can look them in the eye as you're talking. You may even go and get a cup of tea after the group and develop some new friendships. Online, on the other hand, may feel more accessible to you depending on your geography, if there's nothing nearby, or because you may not have to show your face or show your surroundings. And in this kind of group, you might be able to hear other people's stories and really, truly realize it's not just you. You may also find that your experiences and thoughts can help others, which can be an incredible feeling like you've contributed to someone else's home or life or feelings about themselves improving. And meeting other people in this kind of setting can be an incredible shame buster, because you can look at the other people in the room and think, well, I don't think they should be ashamed, and I don't think she should be ashamed, and I don't think she should be ashamed, or him or them. So maybe it plants a seed that you also shouldn't feel ashamed. Now, the Dehoarding Accountability Zoom groups that I run, I guess, are peer support groups. It's a really interesting experience. I've been running them for a while now, and every meeting is different. I think the fact that rather than it being a place just for talking, I think because we've all got a task that we want to be doing, it has a dual role. So we are getting together and doing some dehoarding, which we all are there because we need to do. But the conversations that arise as we do it are so helpful. Those groups are the only time really that I talk to other people who hoard. And for me, as well as other participants, it's an incredible experience to say some of what I think are some of my weirdest thoughts and feelings, and hear other people say, I feel like that as well, is such a powerful thing. I am somebody who does not have the guts to go to an in-person group. I don't. It feels too exposing. The whole reason I started this podcast was that I had nowhere I dared talk about this. And that's not as much the case now. Since starting the podcast, I told my therapist, I have told 2 friends, and I have friends from people who've been guests on the podcast. And so I now have a small number of people I can talk about this topic with. I don't often. Any of them would tell you that. But with them, it's at least not a secret. But when I started the podcast, I didn't have that. That's one of 2 core reasons why I started the podcast. But there's something about spending 90 minutes twice a month with other people who hoard as we do a task and somebody comes across a tricky item or a common train of thought and says, does anyone else ever feel like this? And when somebody else says, yeah, and somebody else says, I do as well, and the way I deal with that is this, it's powerful. It's powerful, and it's such a friendly space. I can't talk about other peer support groups, but I'm sure they tend to be friendly, supportive spaces, just like the Dehoarding Accountability Zoom sessions are, because everybody's there because they are stuck. The bonus of the Dehoarding Accountability Zooms is also that we actually get something done. And that is great, because It means we're not sitting and stewing in how difficult this thing is. We are practically taking action at the same time.
If you want to help to support this independent podcast that is dedicated to spreading awareness and understanding of hoarding disorder and is really unique in what it offers, please do subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Leave a review and share it with your friends or anyone who might be interested. It all helps. Find out how to offer support at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support.
Another option for finding community among people who hoard is therapy groups. These are led by therapists, often who specialise in hoarding. And they can be similar to the peer support groups, but they may have more of a schedule they're working through. They have a more clinical focus. They tend to be more structured. The facilitator of that kind of group can help. If conversations get difficult, they can help with navigating that and making sure that it remains a supportive and helpful space. Another option for hoarding-specific community is online forums, social media groups, subreddits. Those kind of connections are available at any time. They're not real time. You can post somewhere and someone can log on 4 hours later and answer your question. You can share what's going well, what's going badly, with even more anonymity than the other options. The bonus of this is that it's there any time. The difficulty is that other people may not be there. And while you can have a lot more anonymity, that may, as the other side of the coin, feel less like connection. Ideally, all hoarding-specific spaces are focused on respectful interactions, not being judgmental, taking things at your own pace. Some are focused on feelings and some are quite practical. There's often people at different stages in their hoarding or dehoarding journey, which can be brilliant or it can be intimidating. If you are early in your journey and you join a group where somebody is doing really, really well, that might feel inspiring and exciting and give you hope. Or it might feel like, I've got no hope of ever getting that far, this is pointless. Finding the right community is vital, but difficult when there aren't a billion options to choose from. This is the difficulty. In most places in the world, there is not enough provision for a mental health problem this common. Sometimes you will find a group that is the perfect fit straight away. Sometimes it just might not resonate, and that's fine. That might be because the timing isn't right for you. It might be a personality clash or the culture of the group. Sometimes a group is great for you, but then after a while you start to think, okay, I've done a lot of talking about this and now I want to focus on action rather than just talking about it. So a group might suit your needs for a while and then stop. Sometimes you might meet your best ever people. It becomes a lifeline. It's important to set out with a spirit of, I'm going to see. I'm going to explore my options. I'm going to first of all find out what my options are. Have a look in your local area. Have a look at what's online. Consider your options and try something. If something isn't a good fit, that doesn't mean you're failing at the group. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad group, although, not everywhere is foolproof. But if you're resisting the very idea of joining a hoarding-specific community, it's worth having a think about why that might be. You might, for instance, worry about being judged. You might think, I bet my home is worse than everybody else's, and everybody will know that and think I'm terrible. And I would say it is unlikely that however severe your difficulty is or however full your home is, that you would face judgment in a group. There will be people in the group who have very, very, very full homes, people who have what feels like a much milder problem, but the core thing that brings you together is the way you think about objects, the way you relate to objects, and the difficulties you have around objects. And the group isn't there to judge or to decide who is worthy or not. The group is there to support. If you join a group and it does feel judgmental, it doesn't feel supportive, it may not be your group. Another thing that stops people joining hoarding-specific support groups is privacy. As I've mentioned, I couldn't go to an in-person support group because I am so afraid of anybody knowing about my difficulty. And much as I tell myself, but the other people in the room have the same difficulty, so they're not going to think badly of you. For me, that feels insurmountable. You may be gutsier than me in that respect, and if you are, go for it, because I think I have had experience of other support groups on other topics, and the connections and community you can build are brilliant. However, if you're like me and an in-person group feels absolutely insurmountably impossible, look at online options, whether that's online peer support groups, whether that's coming along to the Dehoarding Accountability Zoom, whether it is more about Facebook groups or subreddits or threads. Think about what suits your life, your willingness to talk, and what would help you to open up and what wouldn't. Another concern is that if you attend a support group, you might find yourself overwhelmed or triggered by other people's stories or experiences. It is very, very much the case that most people who hoard have a certain amount of trauma or grief in their history, in their background. And it may be that people want to talk about those issues, but even hearing people talk about their home can feel triggery. It can increase your own anxiety. You might risk feeling competitive even, or like you're hopeless. Everyone else is making progress and you're not. And I'm not going to say there is no risk of any of those things. There is a risk of those things. In a support group, there may be the option to say, I'm finding this really triggery, I need to take a break. Or, I'm finding this really triggery, can we talk about that? It may be that you want a group that is less focused on talking about the difficulties and more focused on taking action. If you're finding that feeling overwhelmed or triggered by other people's stories is impeding your ability to take part. So again, it's worth thinking through your options and deciding what seems to fit your needs at this point in your life and what might help. So if you were tuning into that section and hoping that I would tell you exactly what to do, unfortunately that's not the case, because your needs are different to the next person's needs. My needs are different to your needs. There are themes, but what would suit you and what would suit me and what therefore the best solutions are will vary. Also, what is available will vary. If you want an in-person group and there's nothing for 200 miles, you have fewer options than somebody with 3 different support groups in their city. Also, what works for you now may be different to what works for you in 12 months or what would have worked for you 3 years ago. It's okay to have something be an option for a while, but you do have options. And even if the option that is most accessible to you feels imperfect, it's worth exploring it and seeing whether your resistance to it is based on real practicality or whether your resistance to it is something more internal that might benefit from being challenged a little bit. Now, looking at the broader isolation that can happen in the lives of people who hoard, even if you can find a wonderful hoarding-specific community, life is richer and more filled with love when we have connections in other areas of our lives as well. The difficulty with hoarding is that we can feel like it makes social connections impossible. Now, this kind of isolation might start gradually. You stopped inviting people over because you felt embarrassed, and then you started declining invitations to other people's homes because you knew you couldn't then invite them over to you. You might then avoid activities that might lead to friendships altogether to avoid that difficult scenario. Maybe people you already knew and loved made hurtful comments about your home or just didn't understand, and so you pulled away from them. The world can start to feel smaller and smaller, and you might feel like life is passing you by as you watch other people with friendships and relationships and connections, and you're feeling stuck watching it all happen and unable to take part. And that loneliness and isolation can feel horrendous. And then the shame of your situation at home, or just not being able to find the words to explain it to people, can make it feel impossible to reach out to either new friends or existing friends. And all of this makes sense in some way. There's a logic to it. You can see how it happens. You are protecting yourself from rejection or from judgment or from people being critical. But actually, you deserve connection and you deserve community, whatever your home looks like, however many kitchen tables you've got, however full your rooms are. Your worth as a person isn't determined by what your space looks like, and you have more to offer and more to you than this problem. There are ways to build your own community that don't require people coming into your home. That's the good news. And we are allowed to have whatever boundaries and limits we need to have in terms of who can come into our home, when, if anyone can come into our home. We can have friendships without people coming into our home. I am very lucky to have some incredible friendships, none of whom have been in my home for years. And yet these are still people I love who love me. We have deep, intense, fun times, just not at my house. It can work. And if you have more guts than me, you may end up with friends outside of your home who eventually you even let in, but that is several steps ahead, so let's not worry about that just yet. So, how do we find our community outside of a hoarding conversation, but just in life? Hobbies and interests. It sounds like a cliched place to start, but what do you love doing? Do you love gardening? If so, is there a community allotment scheme near you? Is there a book club in your area? I say book club very carefully because when I previously mentioned a book club on the podcast, The automated transcript thought I was talking about a butt club. I don't know what a butt club is, but if you want to join one of those, fill your boots. But a book club, a group that gets together and does crafts or knitting or collage, a group that gets together to talk about history or astronomy or astrology. There are groups these days, online and in person, for all kinds of niche hobbies and interests. Are you into model railways? I bet there's a group for that. Are you into walking around the countryside? There'll be a group for that. And one of the real benefits about communities that are built around hobbies and interests is that you already have something to talk about. You're not walking into a group of new people and with nothing in common. You're walking into a group of new people and talking about something you already love. I don't know anything about knitting, so it's a bad example, but you can go in and show your latest scarf to people who understand how intricate it was to knit. If there is something you think you might be interested in, but you don't know, or if you already have an interest that you want to know more about, then something like classes or workshops can be a great way to learn more and also potentially meet your people. There are a lot of online options, but there's in-person options as well. There are a lot of one-day workshops to learn an art technique, or a writing workshop at a library, or going to a community centre to learn a new language, or to a cooking class. You might want to go to a meditation group, or go and learn pottery for a weekend course. Again, like with the hobby and interest groups, there's an activity to focus on. So if you go in and you're feeling shy and you don't really want to engage with people, or if you go in and none of the people there are especially your kind of person, then like with the hobby and interest groups, you're kind of okay because you've got something you can be getting on with, and you're still learning and benefiting even if you don't meet your new bestie. Also, there's no expectation of a trip to your house. You show up, you learn something, you go home. And that might be a one-off thing like a workshop. It might be a course every Wednesday for 6 weeks. But you get the dual benefit of learning something you're interested in while also putting yourself in a position where a friendship can develop. Another good way to meet people is volunteering, because whereas there isn't the focus necessarily of a shared interest, there is the focus of a shared thing you care about. So if you go and volunteer to teach English to refugees, then other volunteers you meet and students you meet are people who may have shared philosophy or goals to you. If you go and volunteer at a soup kitchen, you might well meet other people who care about inequality in society. If you go and volunteer at a food bank, the same. If you volunteer at a nature reserve on a conservation project, again, you're doing something you care about, you're probably learning new skills, and you're being connected to people who have a similar outlook to you and a similar shared purpose. Plus, you are showing up to offer help. And that can make you feel good and remind you that you are a good person and a worthwhile person with capability and with value. And the focus is on what you're doing. The focus is on making sure that every person who attends the food bank is treated with dignity, or the focus is on making sure the invasive plant species is eradicated, or the focus is on collecting as much money as you can for a cause that's important to you. The focus is not on what your home looks like. The connection with other volunteers and with service users, students, whatever the setting is around shared values and connection and community and care. And those things cannot be underestimated. Now, I mentioned walking groups and gardening groups earlier as things you could join that relate to hobbies or interests, but I want to talk a bit more specifically about outdoor activities. There are hiking clubs. There are even specific hiking clubs or walking groups for Black and minority ethnic communities, walking groups for queer communities, walking groups for all kinds of things. There are gardening groups for women. There are climbing groups. There's all kinds of activities that you can get involved in that very much have a focus where you meet outdoors and do something. The physical activity is great for your mental health and your physical health. It could be really good for us to just get out into the world and see more greenery or do something physical. And there can be something where conversation flows a bit more easily if you are walking side by side with somebody. It might feel less intense to not be looking somebody in the face. You might be able to talk more openly. And there's always oh, did you see that bird? Or does anyone know what this plant is, that can break the ice? So I wanted to include outdoor activity groups as a slightly different but similar category to hobbies and interests, because I do think they are hobbies and interests, but they have added potential benefits. And there's also faith communities. If your religion or faith is something that's important to you, or if it's something you're curious about and want to know more about, then it can feel meaningful to join a faith group for connection and community. My own experience with religion makes it somewhat difficult to recommend this wholeheartedly. However, I do know that my own experience is my own experience and not everybody's experience. And that ideally a faith group will be a place of compassion and support and not of judgment or criticism or anti-gay conversion therapy. And you are all there because you have a shared faith or passion or need for community. And of course, this isn't the right fit for everybody. I am one of the people it's not the right fit for. But I do know that there are people who find great meaning in spirituality, and there's something about the regularity of a lot of faith groups as well. If you always go to the same service or the same discussion group or the same group at your place of worship at the same time every week, you can really develop a good sense of belonging with that regular social contact and sometimes practical support as well. The thing with all of those options is that they allow us to connect with people around something beyond hoarding. They allow us to look at our lives and who we are in a more holistic way and in a way that can build our interests and values and sense of worth in other ways. In a group like that, we are a person who loves learning Italian or walking our dog, or we are a person who cares about the health of our rivers, or who cares about the plight of people who have fled a domestic abuse situation. Those things mean that we are more than people who hoard, and it is good to remind ourselves of that. But they also mean that the people we meet have some kind of shared interest, something we can talk about, some way to make that initial connection. Now, it's not good to go into these things expecting to instantly find our new best friend. But the benefit of a group focused around our values or our interests or our passions is that they are dual purpose. They allow us to learn more or indulge more in the things we love. They also allow us to gradually become part of a wider community. And that can help to allow us to laugh, allow us to remember that there's a bigger world out there, allow us to be present and develop and learn and grow and talk. And they nurture and nourish different bits of us, different parts of us, and remind us that life can be full of joy and silliness and engagement and serious topics, as well as the difficulties we're having at home. And they can both reinforce and help us to develop further our sense of identity and our purpose. Now, it's something I try really hard with in my friendships. Actually, no, it's not something I try really hard with, but it's something I am told I do well. And it's something that comes naturally to me, but that I recommend trying really hard with if it doesn't come naturally to you, is really nurturing the friendships I already have. Whether that's checking in with people, whether that's trying to sometimes remember important dates and events and people, whether that's a thoughtful little, I saw this and thought of you, whether it's shared jokes, little thoughtful things that really help to nourish and nurture a friendship can help to maintain and deepen a friendship, in my experience. I run de-hoarding accountability Zoom sessions twice a month, where listeners of the podcast and I get together, usually with our cameras off, and we set our own de-hoarding goal. Then we get on with our de-hoarding in the knowledge that others in the virtual room are doing the same. There's something really powerful about the conversations we have in there, and if you'd like to join us, you can grab your ticket for the next one at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/ticket. A lot of us have friends we used to really value but that we lost touch with over time. And we also have existing friendships we might want to strengthen, or new friendships that we are hoping will develop. And all of those can benefit from gentle nurturing. And that can feel challenging when we feel like hoarding creates a distance between us and other people. So rekindling old friendships can feel daunting and a bit vulnerable and risky. We might have people we were close to at one point but just drifted away. Or maybe we had a bad time and cut ourselves off and don't know how to bridge that silence. We might feel like we have to explain too much about why we disappeared, or we might feel like they might be angry with us or don't remember who we are. There's also those people who we knew years ago and you bump into them twice a year and you say, oh, we must get together, and you never do. The thing is, in most cases, people would be genuinely happy to hear from you. People understand that life gets complicated. They might be feeling embarrassed that it's been so long and just not sure how to reach out. People understand that friendships can fade and drift, not because you both stop caring about each other, but just because life gets in the way, circumstances get tricky. We don't have to feel like we have to explain everything or justify anything if we want to get back in touch. I have a friend who I'd lost touch with, and every so often we would message each other and say, oh, we must get coffee. And we never, ever did. And then it got to the point where I thought, oh, it's too late to reach out now. I can't. And that's a shame because I liked her. And then I thought, hold on, why do I think it's too late to reach out now? So I messaged this friend and I said, we keep saying this, but we're never actually doing it. I'm really sorry for my part in us failing to do that. Shall we actually make plans and actually go and get tea and cake? And we did, and it was lovely. Sometimes just saying, this is awkward, but I wanted to get in touch anyway. Just acknowledge outright, this is awkward. I'm not sure how to handle this. I'm doing it anyway because you matter to me. That can be a wonderful thing for somebody to hear. And it doesn't have to be that kind of blunt. You can just say, I was thinking about you today and I miss you, and it would be really nice if you would like to go for lunch. Or not even that much, just, I was thinking about you, how are things? Or, I saw a book today that made me think of that time when and start by reminiscing. You may get people who don't respond, which is fine. It doesn't mean you were wrong to try. If it turns out you did inadvertently hurt somebody by maybe disappearing years ago, they may be a bit cautious, and that's also okay. You might want to take some time to just gradually reassure them that you're in a different place now and you're more open to an engaging and open friendship. And you may well get people who say, yes, I think about you too, and I'm so sorry I haven't been in touch either. With the kids and my job, and we moved house, I just lost track. If somebody is keen to rekindle, you can start gradually and carefully, maybe just chatting by text for a bit at first. Something I did recently was there was a friend I have occasional contact with, and I've never known her that well, but I like her. And we were doing a lot of that, we must get a cuppa one day thing, and then not actually getting a cuppa. And I saw an event coming up, and I messaged her and I said, I've just seen this, it looks amazing, would you like to go? And she immediately said, yes, that does look amazing. And the benefit of that was, if it hadn't gone brilliantly between me and her, we still had the event to focus on. As it was, we got on great and have been a lot closer since. So it may take a while for trust to rebuild. It may be that you meet up with somebody once and whatever you used to have just isn't quite there and you don't do it again. People change, we change, other people change, and relationships evolve. If things feel different now, that might feel good, or it might just feel wrong. But making the effort to reach out matters, even if it doesn't develop into a brilliant new closeness. Even if somebody's not in a position to respond positively, you may just improve their day if they know somebody's thinking about them who they haven't heard from for 15 years. Now, in terms of nurturing existing friendships, friendships do require attention and intention from us, especially if we are at risk of withdrawing because of our hoarding. We might have people in our lives, but we can feel that we're pulling away or keeping people at arm's length. But when we actively maintain and nurture and nourish our friendships, that's about finding ways to stay connected that work for us. With some of my friends, that's just sending silly memes. And it might look on the surface like a silly meme, but what we are saying to each other is, this made me think of you. I wanted to make you laugh. I hope this makes you laugh. And that is an expression of love in itself. We can be a good friend without asking people to our homes, whether we always remember somebody's birthday, whether we send a postcard when we go on holiday, whether we get together with somebody on the same date every year to go to the cinema. And a lot of it is about showing interest and care and love and concern. When somebody knows you are genuinely interested in their lives, when we ask questions, when we really listen to their answers and offer support, that is a way of nurturing and maintaining friendships. And within that doesn't have to look like sacrificing ourselves, because successfully maintaining a friendship is also about honesty, about our limitations and what we can and can't offer, so we can show up without sacrificing ourselves for that person. And in terms of maintaining and nurturing friendships, if we do get the fear or feel too vulnerable or exposed or like we're struggling too much, there are still ways to reach out and show somebody care and love. A close friend and I had a slightly difficult conversation a few months ago, and it was awkward. But what we did was that even at a point where we didn't quite know what to say to each other, if we saw a pretty flower or a nice view or something, we would just send each other a photo of that. And at a point where words were difficult and we were both working out how to deal with this tricky conversation, every time I got a little flower photo from this person or sent one, it was a reminder that, okay, we still love each other. It's still all good. We're working this out. And then because my mental health has been tenuous this year, sometimes I don't have words for that, but I have a small group of friends who I do that same thing with. If I can't send an update about how I am because it feels too vulnerable or because I don't know the words for how I am, I might instead send a photo of a nice autumn leaf I've seen. And it's a way of keeping the connection open, even when I'm not doing brilliantly at socializing or being a sparkling wit or an entertaining company. If we're finding things hard in life and we normally pull back, there can be a real value in saying to people, I'm pulling back a bit because things are hard, not because I don't love you. And people tend to appreciate that, because if you just pull back, they often assume they've done something wrong and worry. Now, I'm saying this, I'm not very good at doing that, to be honest, because when I'm struggling, I tend to think nobody would want to hear from me at all. So I'm saying this as good advice and realizing that bit of it, I'm terrible at and need to do better at. So, note to self. And then how do we nurture the new friendships we're growing? These are perhaps the most tenuous because we're treading new ground, and it takes patience and it takes learning about a new person, learning who we are with that person. But with that patience and consistent small efforts, we can build a budding friendship. When we meet somebody new, it doesn't happen instantly. It's repeated connection and contact that tends to grow intimacy over time. And at the beginning, you might have a very surface level chat about the weather or about the Christmas decorations you're all making in the workshop. But over time, They might tell you that things are difficult in their marriage, or you might find that you both love a particular niche TV show, or you might find that you're sending each other pictures or news stories and suggest meeting outside of the original context, whether that's the workshop or a class or a group. It's harder for connection to build when we're not consistent, whether that's whether we show up physically or not, or also whether, like, some weeks we're very friendly and open and other weeks we're very withdrawn. That makes it harder to build and nurture new friendships. Now, that's not to say we have to be perfect or never get things wrong, because we're human and we all get things wrong and we're all inconsistent and have off days. But aiming to be as reliably consistent as we can is good for growing new friendships. That way, another person can feel more secure in getting to know you. And it's worth thinking about reciprocity as well in any friendship, but in a new friendship in particular. It's a two-way street. If somebody reaches out to you, try to respond. Try not to only reply to them and never reach out first. Try not to always let somebody else buy the drinks or always let somebody else suggest a place to meet. You don't have to be mechanical about this, but think about reciprocity, because friendships grow when both people are engaged and participating. And try not to read too much into what the pace of a new friendship might mean. Some people connect instantly, quickly, deeply. Others take months or years to develop a close friendship. I've had people that I've known on a superficial level for several years, and then something's happened years and years later that means we become very, very close, having known each other a long time without that closeness. Other people I've met, instant closeness from minute one. It can take a long time to move from casual acquaintance to friend, or it can happen fast, and both of those are normal. Don't pressure yourself, but also don't pressure the other person. When we allow things to unfold naturally, that tends to be a good basis for nurturing a new friendship. And finally, part of nurturing friendships is being a good friend to ourselves as well as the other person. That means not beating ourselves up when we find it hard or catastrophizing when we get something wrong. It means not assuming the worst about what someone thinks or feels about you. It means recognizing that you deserve friendship and connection. It means recognizing that you have something to offer other people, that other people will benefit from having you in their lives. And regardless of what your home looks like or what your mental health is doing, you are not unworthy of community and care and connection. Being a good friend to yourself in this context involves giving yourself credit when you make an effort, even if it feels small, sending a text, showing up to the class, messaging that girl you knew in school, sending a Christmas card to the couple you used to have dinner parties with. It takes courage and it involves some vulnerability. And when we are dealing with deep shame and isolation, it takes even more courage. So allow yourself to appreciate that, regardless of how it's received by the other person. We can take small steps because our social circles are not going to transform overnight. And the small step might just be looking on Eventbrite and typing in pottery classes in my city. But the small steps add up, and every move we make towards connection and community is valuable, even if on its own it doesn't feel like much. We don't need hundreds of friends or the kind of social calendar that people have to book 6 months in advance to see us. Even 1 or 2 people we have a meaningful connection with, people we can be real with, can make a big difference in how we feel and how isolated we are. We could start small and not pressurize it and let things develop as they develop. It takes time. And you might put yourself out there and some bits will go wrong. You join a group and you hate it. You start going to Italian classes and you realise, this isn't for me. That's fine. It's information you now have that can help you do something different next. Okay, maybe I want to learn Japanese. Let's try that instead. Okay, maybe pottery isn't for me. I should try watercolour painting. Maybe I hate hiking. I will try dredging a river. Not on your own, as part of a group. Don't go river dredging on your own. Being patient with yourself and with the pace that connections develop allows you to learn about yourself and start to put the feelers out for the kind of care and community that you deserve. Because regardless of hoarding, regardless of anything else, you are a human with a need for care and connection and community, and you are a human who deserves that. So it's worth thinking about one small action you can take today or this week, and thinking about how you can increase your connections with the world out there, even if it's just allowing this podcast to tell you that you're not alone. Whatever feels manageable, small steps matter and they get us towards a place we want to be. If you want to know more about isolation or finding community or the benefits of community, you might want to also go back to episode 130, where I talked with a guest about loneliness and hoarding, or episode 138, where I talked about accountability. But most important, you deserve connection in this world. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time.
Thank you for listening to that Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast.